All right, for today's shading demonstration, we're going to start by, you can see I've erased the grid off of this drawing. So step number one is to erase the grid. From there, we want to take our pink eraser and we're going to lightly drag that eraser across our value map so that we can lighten those lines. We do not want to completely erase those lines. We just want to make them lighter so that it's easier to shade and blend those shapes together. So I'm very lightly dragging the edge of my eraser across this value map. I'm just going to work within the face right now. Okay, now when you go to wipe off any sort of eraser shavings, be really careful with your hands. Now that we're shading, we're building a lot of graphite up on the paper, and if I just wipe this off with my hand, I could smear all of that shading that I do. So instead, it's good to take your paper, and you won't see it on camera, but I'm tapping the edge of my paper on the table to get a lot of those eraser shavings off. You might have to kind of flap your paper in the wind a little bit to get those eraser shavings off, and then you can lightly brush it off. A light paintbrush, a large, light bristled paintbrush works really well for doing that as well. We're going to begin with this part of the cheek and neck on the left side of the photograph here, and I'm going to begin with a B pencil. Pretty much your whole drawing is going to be covered in B. So we're going to begin even in the darkest shadows. Now I'm not pressing hard. I'm just using the B for what it's good for, which is a light gray value. And I'm laying down a layer of B, holding my pencil really flat to the paper by holding on to the back of the pencil. Trying to come right up to the jawline. I'm just working in the zone of the neck right now. And my marks that I make should not show any direction. Okay, by that I mean I shouldn't see any streaky lines. It should look like one consistently gray space. I'm working through the neck, working all the way on this left side of the neck, laying down an even gray tone. Okay, now in Kate's photograph here, her neck gets a little lighter in this region, but it stays kind of a gray with a shadow from her hair. So I'm going to work all the way across the neck, up to the hair. Keep in mind, I'll be able to shade this faster than you will be able to because I have experience doing this. I know what I'm looking for. You're just starting to learn what to look for in terms of how to control the pencil and what kinds of marks it should be making. So it's going to take you longer. On average, it'll take you probably 4 or 5 times as long as it does me to complete this work. Okay, so I've got my base layer of B laid down. Now I'm going to go to 2B. And in my photograph, I'm going to see that in the corner of the neck, where it meets the jaw, it gets darker, stays kind of dark along the jawline. There's a little darker shadow here. And then at the edge of this shape, which is the shadow from the jaw, it becomes a lighter value. And so that's how I'm going to use my 2B pencil, is to build up the shadow area in this jawline space, this jawline shadow that's in the neck. Once again, I'm just holding the end of the pencil and allowing the softness of the graphite to build up those values. I'm not pressing down very hard. We want to slowly build our values. By build our values, I mean make them darker or layer the graphite. But 2B is not my darkest pencil, and so I don't need to get my darkest shadows with 2B. Or I don't need to go as dark as my darkest shadows with 2B. Okay. So remember, we still have 4B, we still have 6B. All right, so I'm making larger strokes now because I want to just kind of blend these areas together. But you can see a heavier shadow, a gray, and then a lighter gray. All right, I'm gonna shift over to the 4B. Now, I'm not gonna lay much 4B down. This corner, a little along the jaw, and then a little bit in the shadow here. Four B is much, much softer than B. It's softer than 2B. And so naturally, without having to press very hard, it's gonna get dark. I need to make sure I'm continually observing my photo. And I don't want to lose the sharpness of the jawline, so I've got to make sure that as I'm shading, I'm reinforcing that edge. I'm not outlining it, I'm just building my shadow up right to the edge of that jawline. This shadow here that I'm making is actually from this curl of hair. Or maybe not, maybe it's from another curl of hair. This curl of hair creates a shadow down here. So in this whole part of the neck, I've got 3 layers of graphite, B, 2B, and in some places 4B. 4B is not in all of the spaces though. It's only where I need my shadow to be the darkest. We're not going to use any 6B in this part of her skin because Kate has very fair skin, light skin. And so we don't want to go as dark as possible because it wouldn't look natural. Very rarely are we going to use 6B in skin for anyone. All right, so now I'm going to move up into the face, coming back to my B pencil. And we're going to take a look. There's a shadow that continues all the way up this side of the face, but that shadow is not all the same value. Okay, there are different values or grays in that shadow. So this is a slightly darker gray. This is a lighter gray. This is a darker gray up here. Recognizing that's going to be important. And I'm just going to lightly draw in where that darker shadow is so that I have that mapped out. Okay, so I've got my B pencil, and once again, I come in here and work right into my value shape. So we're learning to build value layers, graphite layers that get darker and richer as we build them up. This takes a lot of control and continuous observation. This isn't one of those things that just has an automatic outcome, like, oh, if I do this, it'll turn out such a way. Nope, you have to watch what you're doing and control what you're doing to get the outcome that you hope for. There's no magic in this. It's all a process. Okay, so I've got a good layer of B. Now I'm going to go with 2B. And I'm looking at, pull this over, looking at this shadow specifically, this shadow under the cheek. That's where I really need to start building these, the shadow in this area up a little darker. So I've got 2B. Now what I have to be careful of is making it so that my jaw and neck blend together. I really have to avoid that happening. I want the jawline to stand out, to be a separate object from the neck. This shadow that I'm creating here adds some definition to the cheekbone. So what we're trying to do with shading is create a 3-dimensional surface. So you remember with perspective, we used vanishing points, we used converging lines, and that created the illusion of depth on a two-dimensional surface. All right, now we're not using vanishing points, we're not using converging lines, and yet we're still trying to create that illusion of depth on a flat piece of paper, that illusion of form, something that has 3 dimensions. So you can see there's many ways to do this, and some artists combine them. So like you're drawing architecture, you use perspective to make that architecture look 3-dimensional, and then you go in and you shade that architectural drawing like we're doing now, and the space becomes more and more believable. This is done in drawings and paintings. This is done on even in movies, like when we see computer-generated graphics. Okay, they're using these techniques to make it look realistic. Sometimes on the computer, sometimes in older movies by hand. But even when they're using computer-generated graphics, it's not like the computer does the work. They still have to do that by hand. So you watch an animation that's kind of like a computer-made, an animation made on a computer. It's still done by hand, by a human. It's just using software. In some ways, that's actually, I think, more difficult. All right, so we've got a lot of value built up there. It's not smooth, it's not blended. That's where our 4B is gonna come into play. Okay, the 4B is not only going to make things darker in some places, but it's gonna help us blend things together. Because the beauty of a softer graphite is that we can lay down very thin layers of it, and that's how we're gonna start to blend one value shape into another when we need to do that. So I'm coming through this whole area, and I'm gonna make sure this shadow in the neck is still dark enough to stay separate from the jaw and keep that jawline nice and sharp. Under the chin, on the jaw, is a really nice dark shadow that helps keep the chin up off of the neck. Okay. Got a little bit of a shadow here in the crease of the mouth. Definitely a shadow here in the cheek. And then a dark shadow here in the crease of the smile. Now, since we've only shaded part of the face, it's gonna look a little crazy, like it might look pretty dark and a little strange because the rest of the face is just a bunch of lines. So if you need to, as you're going, just cover up that incomplete part so that you can just see the part that you've developed. Right? We have to play some tricks with ourselves sometimes to be able to keep an eye on our progress and keep our eye on the prize. I'm always looking back at the photograph as I'm doing this. Okay, I don't want to do any of this blind. I'm trying to refer back and forth and copy what's happening here onto the photo. Okay, that's about as far as I can go right now. I would continue up into the eye and then the nose, and that would allow me to continue over to the right. Now, if you're a left-handed person, you could always start at the right and move to the left. I'm right-handed, and so I was working this direction, but if I was left-handed, I would work this direction so that my hand doesn't smear the graphite. All right, good luck.